Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now, as you can probably tell by the surroundings, I'm not in my home office, so I apologize for bad lighting and audio. You do what you do when you're in a hotel. But this gave me some time. I've been running through the comments on my channel and I've noticed a common theme of questions which I haven't been able to answer, and I haven't found anyone else out there who's able to answer those questions as well. And that question is, if I've got solar and batteries and I get a heat pump, how much extra capacity am I going to need in my batteries to cover the heat pump? And more importantly, will they pay for themselves? So that's the question we're going to answer today. Okay, so this can be quite a complicated spreadsheet to be able to go through. So I decided, I know what I'll do is I'll build a web tool. Now I'd love to tell you that I've been able to simplify it down so there's like 3 buttons. It's not like that at all. But if you head over to my website, jonathantracy.com, down in the comments, there'll be a link to that. The address is also on the screen. Now, once you get there, what I want you to do is head across to Tools. Now, this is really the only bit of the website that I've done any work on. So head over to Tools. For those of you that were here a few months ago, the heating cost comparator that I built is still there. But if you scroll down a little bit past that, you'll come to the heat pump battery payback tool. Now, this isn't supposed to be something that you're going to use day in, day out, and you'll see why you probably don't want to use it day in, day out in a moment. But this tool allows you to work on some assumptions to see if adding extra battery capacity to your existing system to cope with a heat pump is going to be financially viable. Okay, so let me walk you through the tool. So I've broken it down into sections for you. So we start off at the top here with what I call the season scope and assumptions. Basically, what I'd like you to do is to input where you think your winter period starts and ends. Now, ideally, this would be, when do you turn your central heating on? When do you turn it off? Now, for me, we normally turn our central heating on somewhere around about the 15th of October. So I'll set that as the winter start. And then for the winter end, we usually turn it off somewhere around about mid-March. So we'll go to the 15th of March. Then I'm going to ask you to make an estimate. And this is really the only way we can make this work is, over the course of that entire winter period, think of the coldest day. Last year, that day for us was in early January. It was about -6 degrees. How many of those days on average are you going to get during a winter? Now, I'm going to be really generous here. I'm going to say there are 20 days across that entire sort of 5-month period where we get those really cold temperatures. And what we're going to do with this is build the assumption that we're going to have 20 really cold days, and then the rest of the days are going to be average. So what we're going to do is we're going to model this on the coldest days, and then we'll take half of those values for the average days. Then the field that currently says 0 there, the average export outside the winter. So if you're going to be adding more battery capacity to your system, during the summer, you're going to have the ability to store a lot more energy, which you can then export. Now, either you fill the batteries up and export it overnight. However you do that, it is up to you. But you're going to have some extra capacity. You might as well make some money from it. So for the rest of the year, what is your daily average that you would export? Now, in the summer, we might export 50 kilowatt hours, but we don't export 50 kilowatt hours in late March, early April, and certainly not into late September and early October. So pick what you think is a reasonable average. I'm going to say 10 kilowatt hours for now, just to pick a number. Then what I want you to do is model your coldest day. Now, you might have this data. I'm going to show you what mine is. We're going to use that day back in January. But what you'll see here is we've got half-hour periods for the whole day. And the ones that are green are the Octopus Intelligent Go cheap periods, and the ones that are pink are the off-peak periods. And you can toggle any period to on peak or off peak, and we'll come to pricing in a minute, but you can, so if you're on cozy and you maybe got some other periods during the day, just toggle where it says peak and they'll turn into off peak. Then what I've made the assumption is that you're going to use about half a kilowatt hour of heating throughout the day. So on a really cold day, you're going to use about an extra 12 kilowatts. And then a couple of boosts. So I've set a default at 6 a.m. I've set another one, here it says looking at the grid, one at 1700 for 2 kilowatt hours. But that's not my coldest day. These are just the defaults. So what I found was we were using about 2 kilowatts in the morning just to bring the house back up to temperature from its overnight low. We were using about another 2 kilowatts at about 9 a.m. Some of that was for heating hot water as well after we'd had our morning showers. We were using about another 2 kilowatts at lunchtime, and we were using about 2 kilowatts at 3 in the afternoon, and we've still got the 1700, and again 2 at about 7 o'clock in the evening, and again another 1 at about 9. That roughly fits my coldest day. Now your coldest day might be different, but you can play with these numbers. Okay, once you've done that, scroll down a little bit further. This is where we're going to ask you to put your prices in. So in this case, your off-peak price and your peak price. Now I've put in what are my Octopus Intelligent Go prices, so 7p off-peak, about 26.5 pence for peak. And then I'm going to ask you to put in your export price. Because if you remember, we said we're going to buy some more batteries, or we're thinking about buying more batteries. How much are we going to make? So in this case, Octopus outgoing is about 15 pence. Now, these numbers that you've put in up here are just for your heat pump, just for your hot water and your heating. So how much extra background load per hour is your house using? Now, it's set to a default of about 0.7 of a kilowatt. In my case, it's actually less than that. We use about half a kilowatt base load, and then the heat pump is on top of that. So then we scroll down and we ask about your current battery. So what is what we call the nameplate? What does your battery say its size is? The default is set here to 10 kilowatts. So if you've got a 10 kilowatt battery, what is your depth of discharge? So maybe you discharge it to 90%. Some people discharge it to 100%. That's up to you, but I've set it to 90 as a default. And what's your round trip efficiency? Again, we've set it to 90%, so you lose about 10% in the AC to DC conversion. And then the last thing we asked you about your battery is the inverter that's connected to it. What size is that? Because that dictates that during these green periods, the cheap rate periods, when you're charging your battery from the grid, how much energy you can pull in per hour. So I've set it to 5, but if you have a 10 kilowatt inverter, then push that up to 10 kilowatts. So mine is a 10 kilowatt inverter, so I will push it up there. Now, I've actually got a lot more batteries, enough battery to cover my heat pump, but I want to show you how the tool works. So I'm going to leave the capacity set to 10 kilowatts right now. Okay, so then we get into some numbers, and these numbers will calculate in real time as you use the tool. So again, it just gives us a restatement of what we've got there. We've got 6 off-peak hours, we've got 18 on-peak hours. The daily heat pump energy sum, the sum of all of those slots, on my coldest day is 53 kilowatt hours. Now, scroll down a little bit further, daily energy from background. So that was what we set up here. Remember the half a kilowatt per hour of background? So it's saying we need 65 kilowatt hours for the coldest day of the year. Now, most people, that's not going to be realistic. I've deliberately pushed these numbers up a little bit just to show you a kind of worst case scenario. But once we've entered all that data, we can start to see here, okay, if we've only got a 10 kilowatt battery and we're only discharging it to 90% and we're losing 10%, we've really only got an 8.1 kilowatt battery. So we would need to cover our entire usage 48.8 kilowatt hours of battery storage. Like I said, not realistic. I just wanted to show you how these add up. So with an extra battery at what we call the nameplate capacity, that's what the advertisers say it is, we would need nearly 60 kilowatt hours. Well, let me readjust these numbers to show you what we actually used on the coldest day of the year. So we didn't heat the heat pump every couple of hours with an extra couple of kilowatts. I was just putting that in to sort of show off how the tool would work. Oh, actually, that was why it was so high. There was a mistake in there. I put 22 kilowatts in for 1 hour. That's not right. So we actually used about half a kilowatt hour, except for roughly at tea time when we boosted the temperature a little bit. We went up about 2 kilowatts. And then in the early evening, we gave it a boost as well when we maybe sat down to watch a bit of TV. But the rest of that looks pretty good. Okay. Everything else we're going to leave exactly as it is, so let's just revisit these numbers. So what we can see here is we actually used 33 kilowatt hours. Well, just to give you an idea, when I look back at my usage for January last year, on that day we used 33.1 kilowatt hours for the whole day, for the whole house, including the heat pump. The battery is still set to 10 kilowatts, so we basically need to make up a shortfall of 24.9 kilowatt hours. And to do that, we would need a battery that was our advertised capacity of just over 30 kilowatts. And then we get a couple of numbers, the savings per shifted kilowatt. So obviously if we're buying that energy in at 7 pence per kilowatt hour, storing it in our battery, we're saving ourselves about 18.72 pence per kilowatt hour. Now, here's where we get into the what ifs. So if you were to just buy exactly what that system says there, you would need about 30.7, in this case, 30.74 kilowatt hours. I'm going to ask you to put in your price per kilowatt hour. So if it's a 10 kilowatt battery, take the price of the battery, divide it by 10, put in the number of pounds per kilowatt hour. Now here, what you should do is not just put in the price of the battery, put in the fully installed and provision cost of that battery. So if you paid £10,000 for a 10 kilowatt battery, you paid way too much. But if you paid £10,000 for a 10 kilowatt battery, then you'd obviously be paying £1,000 a kilowatt hour. 350 seems about reasonable. I'm sure that somebody's going to jump in the comments and say, but if you used a Fogstar battery, you could get it for a lot less than that. You put your number in. So I'm actually going to put 300 per kilowatt hour in there. Then we get the bad news at the bottom. So if we were to just add the capacity that it's telling us, another 30 kilowatts of batteries, it would take 12.8 years to pay it off. So that's based on what we would be able to save from importing energy overnight, storing it in the battery to run the heat pump. And if you look down at the bottom here, our export during the non-winters, we'd make about £319.50 based on our average export. Now, again, you can play with all of these numbers. You can put in whatever you want, but realistically, the way we're going to be able to see this work is if the cost of batteries were to come down significantly, let's just say they came down to £200 per kilowatt hour. Look what happens to the payback. We're down at 8.5 years. So even if you were to install 30 kilowatt hours of batteries, you'd pay them off in 8.5 years. But that's not realistic. You're probably not going to get it. You're probably more like £350 a kilowatt hour at the moment. So you're looking at about 15 years payback on those batteries. So you've got to ask yourself, if your sole reason for buying more batteries is to make up the shortfall from your heat pump, are you willing to wait 14.9 years for them to pay themselves back? I don't think a lot of people would. But anyway, this tool is there for you to play with. I'd love to know what you think. I'd love to know if you look at it and you say, hang on, there's something missing here. You've made a mistake. Like I say, I put this together because I wanted to be able to answer that question. And there are a lot more assumptions we can put into this. Trust me, this was a lot more complicated before I slimmed it down. But if you can think of a better way to map this out, you look through the numbers and you say, hey, you've missed something out. You should have added this in. Let me know. I will update the tool as quickly as I can. But this should let you answer the question, should I spend more money on batteries to cover the cost of my heat pump? I think at this price, unless you can get a really good deal on extra batteries, don't do it just for the heat pump. Now, if your plan is to expand your solar system and you need more storage and there are lots of other reasons, then there might be a better reason to do it. But when I look at this, when I look at realistic numbers, I don't think it's viable with the current price of batteries. Anyway, love to know what you think. Hit me up in the comments below. I will hopefully be back in my home office for the next video. And yeah, I would love to get your feedback and I'll answer any questions anybody's got in the comments below. With that, I just want to say thanks for clicking on the video. I've now got to get out and go and find myself something to eat because this hotel is not serving any food today. So I'm going to go for a walk in London, see if I can find myself something to eat. I'm pretty sure they have restaurants somewhere around here. It just remains for me to say thanks for clicking on the video. I really do appreciate it. And if I'm lucky, I will see you back here real soon for another video. Take care.